Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Captains of Industry. I'm Alicia Seckham. With an estimated 60,000 employees, Cisco is regarded as one of the world's leading network technology companies operating across both developed and emerging markets. The man responsible for driving Cisco's strategy in South Africa, which is regarded as one of the largest product and services business in the company's emerging theatre within Europe, Middle East and Africa, is David Meads, and he's our Captain of Industry tonight. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
David, let's get straight into it. You're reaching the end of a 2.5-year assignment as MD of Cisco South Africa in July this year. Let's reflect back a bit on what it's taken to steer this part of the organization.
Well, it's firstly, it's gone so quickly. That's the thing that strikes me. It doesn't seem like it was nearly 2 years ago that the World Cup was happening, and I came down just as that furore was starting to hit the country. It's been an amazing experience. Firstly, it's been an amazing experience for all of the positive reasons, but also presented lots of challenges that I hadn't experienced before. So very fulfilling and very rewarding, I would say, in equal measures.
Yeah, with that being the case, I mean, like you say, you've managed to steer the ship. It's been rewarding, but it's also taken a bit of navigation around obstacles along the way. So what do you attribute the kind of growth and success Cisco has seen over this period to?
Well, there's a lot of foundations were put in place before I arrived, so I'm not going to take credit for everything that's happening in the last 2.5 years for what I've done. We've got a great team at Cisco in South Africa. There's a fantastic energy and level of innovation that happens within the business. What I've tried to do when I came down was just try and instill a very clear vision that the company could focus on and everybody could get behind, so understanding what it is that they do in their day jobs and how that relates to the vision that we're trying to drive for Cisco in South Africa. And then just try to bring a very open communication style. I think that was one of the things that perhaps historically hadn't been in place for the company in South Africa, and people seem to have responded to that very well.
Yeah, looking at the key priorities of that vision, I came across leadership and collaboration really ranking top of the agenda. What does it take in your books to be a successful leader?
I think for me, and I can only obviously use my own reference point, but for me it's having some very fundamental principles, and for me that's things like integrity, honesty, very open and transparent communication, being clear that everybody within the business has a role to play. We have many different functions operating within Cisco South Africa, and whether it's somebody who's actually responsible for making sure the equipment comes into the country and gets out of the country, or whether it's the person who's sitting in front of the customer closing the big deal, everybody has an equal role to play in trying to drive that vision, and just making everybody aware of that. That classic open door policy is also, I think, boded well.
Yeah, like I say, it's leadership and collaboration that's the focus here, but it's a tough balancing act to play. I mean, you've got stamping authority on the one hand and engendering this collaborative spirit on the other hand. How do you walk that tightrope?
Well, it's by leading from the front. You can't ask people to do things that you're not prepared to demonstrate yourselves. And it's interesting, if you look at how we collaborate, there's many stakeholders to our business. Within Cisco South Africa, we have a number of different functions in themselves, but we're also part of a large multinational business, so we have our stakeholders at an emerging theatre level, but also globally. Without our partners in Cisco globally, but certainly in South Africa, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. So it's being able to balance that collaborative spirit, but across many different stakeholders within your organisation and then outside of your organisation.
Of course, that's just one act that you've got to play. In terms of other acts, I mean, how do you balance things like opex and capex spend in what has been a very tough business environment where ultimately the bottom line is the bottom line?
Sure. And it's always a difficult juggling act for any leader of any business, and I wouldn't I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge for us. I think it's again by aligning to those priorities. As a corporation, we have 5 core priorities. We make sure that we in South Africa understand how we align to those priorities, and then from an opex perspective, it's making sure that the money that we spend to run the business and to drive the business again is equally accountable to those priorities. So long as we can keep the dots joined up from A to B, we'll do that pretty well, and we have done that pretty well in the last 2 years.
Is it more complex to do that well in a terrain like South Africa within an emerging market?
Yes, is the short answer to that. For all the obvious reasons it is. We have challenges. I'll give you one example. We have challenges that are somewhat unique in the emerging theatre from a talent perspective. You know, we've got some fantastic talent in Cisco in South Africa. There's a lot of competition in this marketplace, and a lot of those people, those global competitors, are coming into South Africa, seeing the potential that Africa offers for growth, and they need talent. So where do they go for that talent? They typically go to the leaders of the industry. So some of the challenges we've had, which are perhaps unique compared to a more mature marketplace, is how do we retain that innovative talent that we have, and helping us drive the business forward, yet balancing that with the financial management.
Yeah. So how do you?
Not easily, I will tell you. And you know, I would also admit that we haven't done it perfectly. I think in the first 6 months or so we had some challenges, but I think once people understood what we're trying to drive here in South Africa, you know, what my vision is on behalf of the company, that they could see how they could align to that. They could see how the growth opportunity was there for them in their careers, from a personal development point of view, but also see what their role meant to making a difference to the country. A lot of what we're driving as our vision for Cisco in South Africa is around country transformation, and when people understood that that was what we're trying to drive, they wanted to be part of that. And you know, there's no better place to be part of driving that than at Cisco in this industry.
In an emerging market like South Africa, though, and I posed this question to the head of Microsoft South Africa last week, where you talk about cloud computing, apps, visualization, efficiencies via technology. I mean, how do you communicate relevance to a market where majority of the population are so focused on just getting access to basic commodities like water, like power, like like food, basic infrastructure as well?
It's a great question, and it's not an easy balance to strike. And if I may, I'll answer that question firstly from a perspective of the government in South Africa. The challenge they have is there are millions of people who don't have the basic needs that any human being should expect from an infrastructure perspective. At the same time, for the longer term growth and sustainable growth of South Africa as an economy, you have to invest in ICT. Let me give you two examples of how we try and build that relationship internally then, but also externally. One of the technologies that is fueling a lot of the growth within the internet, and certainly within Cisco, is video technology. Now, if you look at how video could apply to driving education for the country, if you could connect imagine for a moment you could connect all the schools and learning facilities in South Africa, of which there's 25,000-30,000 of these around the country. If you could connect those over a broadband network of some type or other, and you could then provide education content that was derived centrally, even brought into the country potentially, then using broadband and using video, you can potentially get that content, the same level of education and content, to a student who's sitting in a rural area, in a rural community, to one who's sitting in downtown Johannesburg. So it's a great leveler from a technology point of view, and being able to provide the same level of education to all students. Another example would be the same on healthcare.
Exactly. Those are, two sectors where a lot of the technology companies have picked up on to actually get the relevance of technology to really hit home, and focus on that. At the same time, you've highlighted that the company really needs to simplify the way it does business with both its customers and its partners. Just how much of a challenge does this pose, making IT simple to understand?
Well, it's not an easy one. Otherwise, anybody could do it, and everybody would do it. As a company, we're 27 years old now, so we're still a relatively young company within the world of ICT. And what we've tried to do is to retain that startup mentality, to be agile, to be responsive. But at the same time, we're a $40 billion plus company with 60,000 employees, so there's an amount of legacy that we built up in terms of processes and systems over that period of time. In fact, as a company, we recognized this time last year, that there was a lot of change that we needed to put into place, exactly as you say, to try and make it easier to do business with. Some of that is a mentality, some of it's a cultural change, and some of it is about systems and processes. We've coined a phrase within Cisco now about faster to the yes. And we need to be able to make decisions, and what we've done is empower our employees to make those decisions. Now, people are going to make some decisions wrong. They're going to make some wrong calls, and that's fine. We've told people that it's okay to make a wrong call once, but you don't do it twice. So we're trying to empower out to the field, and it's a great example. If we look at Cisco in South Africa, I have more empowerment now than I would have had 2 years ago, which is part of us trying to simplify doing business with us.
Well, you touched on agility and being responsive personally. Just how adaptable a person are you?
Well, I've moved my life, including my family, from the UK to South Africa, and professionally, I think we've been successful. Personally, it's had its challenges, as it would with any company, any family moving to the other side of the world. But we've adapted pretty well. So I would, without wishing to sound conceited, I'd say in fact, the experience has probably taught me that I have the ability to adapt more so than I thought perhaps I could.
Yeah,
you always talk about children when you put children through any sort of disruption. Children, they'll adapt because they can, and ours have.
Yeah.
But actually, it's taught me that even at the age I am, you still have the ability to adapt to a new environment and a new situation.
Well, it's something that we're going to be getting into in just a bit. Before we do, though, I mean, just looking at competitive advantage, what do you think gives Cisco the competitive edge?
Well, we have a fantastic history. So starting from a data routing and switching perspective, we have a fantastic history which has given us a great market share. I think we have a fantastic innovative spirit within the organisation. We have a great strategy in terms of innovating from within, with our own R&D, but also by acquisition. And I think we find a good balance that enables us to partner, acquire, and innovate from within. One of our differentiators and one of our key differentiators is our partners. Everywhere around the world where Cisco operates, we work with our partners. South Africa is no different. Without our partners, we wouldn't have the ability to scale. We wouldn't have the ability to supplement our technologies with value-added services that make these solutions palatable for our customers. So those are some of the things that I think make us pretty unique in our market.
As much as that is the case, I mean, there seems to be this theme or trend that's developing where there's a focus on sharing network infrastructure, and while one sees how something like this could benefit via enhanced productivity, lowered costs as well, surely practically speaking, it's actually got to be a lot harder to get right.
Well, whether it's harder to get right, I don't know. It's something new. I guess to be specific, you're alluding to cloud services, for example, where people will share an infrastructure. It is new. I think there's a certain degree of nervousness from certainly some of the larger customers about putting some of their IPR into a shared environment, potentially into a publicly shared environment. But it's complex because everything that we do with our technologies is pretty complex when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it. But is it any more complex than anything that the industry's seen before? Not really. I don't think it is. I think it's just a shift in mindset. The benefits in being able to leverage these sort of consumption models, I think, are massive, not least of all from a cost perspective, but also productivity.
On that note, safe to assume that it's leading change is possibly a little harder to do than leading an organization?
Certainly as hard, as difficult, and it depends on the organization you're leading, of course.